Illumination Engineering and Electric Utility Services. Today we take up lesson 16. Lesson 16 is titled Sports Lighting. The instructional objectives for this lesson are: list the factors responsible for sport lighting, list the categories of users concerned with sport lighting, state the grouping of games according to CIE. Having studied the various aspects of requirements for artificial illumination, the categories of lamps, the processes that are responsible for use in lamps, and the components that form a lighting system, the ways to measure, categorize and standardize these aspects, we went on to look at various ways of taking care of interior lighting in the last lecture. So, it is time we had a look at exterior lighting, and one of the ways, most important issues as far as exterior lighting comes is the sport lighting. The sports lighting per se is a lighting for the sports facilities, and it addresses the visual comfort or the ability of viewing the game, playing the game, assessing the game for user groups, which are four in type. They are players, officials, players who play, officials who basically assess the game, spectators who come to watch the game, and last but not least the media, because today in fact the game being played in one place is allowed to be seen all over the world. So, these are the issues. So, we have, whenever need to light a sports facility, which is it could be interior, it could be exterior, but predominantly you could call it as exterior thing, has four user groups, that is players, spectators, officials and the media. Players and officials, they are basically confined to the area or the play arena, so that the play results in good results. Now, playing could be fundamentally for our recreational purposes for the player himself, and the other thing is the entertaining for the spectators. Spectators need to follow the game, they need to follow the performance of the game, and therefore should be able to move around the arena where they are located. So, coming to the point of view of lighting for the purpose of spectators, the play area surrounding also needs to be illuminated, considering that large number of people may be entering and exiting over these areas. The safe entry and exit is to be ensured when the levels are chosen for the spectator region, and this becomes more and more as the crowd level increases. Safety requirements start increasing with the increase in the crowd level. The TV and film, this is the media requirement, and they are expected to provide conditions suitable for good reproduction of color, and the recommendations for these lighting are incorporated in CIE recommendation number 83. This looks at the picture quality from two angles. One, the picture view from a close-up of a player, and the ability of spectators to watch the game. And an important issue that needs to be maintained is that this lighting scheme should have a backup supply to produce continuous transmission for the media. The criteria therefore relevant for sports lighting are: one, the horizontal illuminance, which is normally the horizontal illuminations or the lux levels on the play area. The vertical illuminance, obviously we are looking at the movement of the players and the play object, typically a ball, and therefore the illuminance levels in the vertical plane become important. And illuminance uniformity, because the uniformity of illuminance enables us to clearly distinguish which player is involved, where the action is taking place. And just as any lighting installation, glare restrictions must be there. The modeling and shadows, in fact, shadows are the only way to get a good perspective of the depth of any object, a three-dimensional object. Therefore, modeling and shadows become important. And needless to mention, in fact, although the spectator viewing may not very much depend on color appearance and rendering, but from the media point of view, when the pictures are transmitted for the TV and film, it becomes very important. So, we have horizontal illuminance, vertical illuminance, the uniformity of illuminance, glare restriction, modeling and shadow requirement, plus color rendering and appearance as important indices or factors that need to be considered in lighting a sports installation. The horizontal illuminance is responsible because this, in fact, enables the illumination of major portion of the play area. That is, if you are talking of a football game, is the football field. Similarly, this is responsible for serving the adaptation of the eye. So, illumination, once illuminance on the horizontal plane is maintained as required, in fact, it is found that it takes care of the illuminance requirements in the other planes too. Now, the illumination, in fact, acts as a background, and this needs to be adequate, and it is highly important that horizontal illuminance is maintained. Now, the circulation area, as already said, in the spectator zone adjoining the play area is necessary from the point of view of safe entry and exit. You need to have adequate illumination. In these levels may be lower than what is required in the play area, but there is some minimum levels required to enable safe entry and exit. The vertical illuminance should be such that it produces adequate contrast over the player's body. This is necessary for the identification of the player. In fact, from the spectator viewpoint of the identity of the player gives more pleasure or entertainment value to the game, and therefore it is necessary. Now, this can happen only if you have sufficient vertical illumination. And therefore, vertical illuminance must be adequate, and that becomes the most second important factor. And from the point of view of the vertical illuminance, both magnitude and direction become very, very critical. From the point of view of players, the vertical illuminance must be important or adequate from all directions, whereas from the point of view of spectators and media here we mean television or film, how do they pick? They pick through set of cameras. So, the location of the cameras, and therefore there is a defined direction. So, what do we mean? The vertical illuminance requirements for the players themselves could be in all directions, so that they are able to really see the movement of the player and the object, whereas spectators, since they are located in a particular stand, or cameras for the media which are located at a specific place, a defined direction is there. But it is observed that if horizontal illuminance on the play area is taken care, the vertical illuminance levels become adequate, considering the recommended practices of mounting the lamps as is the practice as per the CIE recommendations. So, what it means? Yes, horizontal illuminance no doubt plays as a background, but vertical illuminance is necessary from the point of view of a good game, and if horizontal illuminance is taken care, vertical illuminance levels become equally adequate. The specifications or the measurements for vertical illuminance are usually done at a height of 1.5 meters from the play area. So, this is about 1.5 meters above the ground, the vertical illuminance levels are specified. Apart from player recognition and picture quality, the vertical illuminance aids observing the movement of ball by the players as well as spectators. That I have been saying that the vertical illuminance is required for the movement of the players, recognition of players, as well as the movement of the ball. Spectator stands are also part of the environment, and they also need to have equally adequate vertical illuminance. Now, what is luminance uniformity? In fact, we said the third important factor is the luminance uniformity. We had said horizontal illuminance plus vertical illuminance are required, no doubt. Now, the good illuminance levels in both horizontal and vertical planes are required, and once you have good levels maintained and uniformity maintained, then there is no need of adjustment of cameras continuously, which is necessary for the media. Now, by definition, we have two indices for uniformity. We talk of uniformity indices for both horizontal illuminance as well as vertical illuminance. The uniformity index 1, U sub 1, is defined as the ratio of lowest illuminance in the area to the highest illuminance. So, there are two uniformity indices, U sub 1 and U sub 2, the first one being the ratio of lowest illuminance to highest illuminance. The second one, which we call U sub 2, is the lowest illuminance to the average illuminance. These are the two indices, and it is observed that from the point of view of visual comfort and satisfaction of the four user groups, namely players, officials, spectators and media, the ratio of average illuminance in the horizontal plane to vertical plane be kept between 0.5 and 0.2. This is the illuminance levels, average illuminance levels in the two planes. Now, if we talk of glare, by definition we had already looked at in a detailed manner in the lecture on glare. The disturbing brightness in the field of view is what we call glare, and when it enters or it's near, we call it glare, and this can be eliminated by an appropriate choice. If they are mounted well above and suitably aimed, this can be minimized. So, having covered the factors horizontal illuminance, vertical illuminance, then the illuminance uniformity, which indices glare, the next important factor is the modeling and shadow. The modeling and shadow enables us to reveal the complete form and texture and gives an overall impression of players, ball. I am calling it ball here, but then if it is a badminton, if it is a shuttle badminton, it will be the shuttle, the object that is being played. And this very much depends on the direction of light and depending on the number and type of light sources. With hard shadows are formed from narrow beams. Hard, deep shadows are formed from narrow beams, whereas flat shadows with less lighting from a luminous siding. So, these are the two extreme forms of shadow formation. So, you have hard deep shadows from a narrow beams and from a large luminous side lighting of low lighting levels you have flat. So, one aims to have shadows between the two, and often shadows are improved by providing few spotlights, and this is more important from the point of view of observing pictures on TV for the media requirement. It becomes very important than the player. Now, in order to have shadows kept under control or good modeling, the main camera should allow about 60% of the light to come and 40% from the opposite side. That way it enables good quality modeling. This is about the modeling, and we said color appearance and color rendering, though may not be necessary in the field for the spectators and the players, it is very much necessary for the media point, and it is very important to have a very good color perception. Maybe a little color distortion is acceptable, and this has two distinct aspects. One, the color impression of the total environment, which we call the color appearance of the light, which is mainly due to the type of lamps that are used. Incidentally, one must mention here that the type of lamps which are used these days are based on metal halide lamps. The other is the color rendering, the ability to faithfully reproduce the object color. In fact, this is one way of assessing or the radiation from a lamp source. We have already seen color rendering index or color CRI. Now, this very much depends on the spectral energy distribution of the light that is emitted, and the color appearance varies obtained from color temperatures which are varying between 2000 to 6000, where 2000 correlates to a warm color, 6000 corresponds to a cooler color in degree Kelvin. And remember, this was the temperature, color temperature mentioned for the good quality radiator, which if maintained at that temperature gives similar color. Color rendering, as already mentioned in the earlier lecture, is specified by color rendering index or CRI, or abbreviated as RA. The maximum possible value which it may attain is around 100, which is on a basis of comparison to a daylight situation. Higher the RA, more agreeable is the environment. This is the thing. Now, here is a table which gives us the typical illuminance levels, that is, and we have the first column mentions the sport. It is incidentally, the sport covered here in this table is athletics. The two categories, indoor athletics and outdoor athletics, have been shown. The level of activity has been categorized into three categories. One, T/R, which means tournament, amateur or recreational. Second one is C sub A, C sub P, which corresponds to competition in nature for national and international. See, the national would mean the coverage requirement would be over certain region, whereas international would mean much larger region. Then the lux levels are mentioned. For indoor athletics, we find it varies from 200 lux for a recreational game to about 500 for international competition. And the uniformity indices U1, U2 are specified, which vary from 0.3 to 0.5, and the color temperature is varying from 2000 to 4000 degree, 4000 K, and the RA is around 65. Now, if you go to the outdoor, we find the lux levels required are less, and even the uniformity indices U1, U2 are lower compared to the indoor levels. However, we find for an international coverage, either indoor or outdoor, the color rendering index and the color temperature are similar. We also find another grouping mentioned in the last column, which is mentioned as A. This grouping, according to CIA, is dependent on the action of the game. Now, this faster the game is, the higher is the grouping level. Incidentally, the games are grouped into three groups: A, B, C, depending on the speed. A corresponds to slow speed, high object games. The object being smaller, the group level goes higher, that is, it moves like, for instance, a table tennis would, which has got a fast game with small ball, will come under group C. Coming to badminton, we find the levels are higher than those we saw in case of athletics, for the simple reason the game speed also increases and the object size also comes down, and you can very well see the what was between 100 to 500 lux in case of indoor athletics has increased to about 300 to 800 lux. These are as per the CIE recommendations. But from the color rendering point of view, the color temperature requirement and color rendering are more or less around 65 and 4000 K. Coming to the basketball, again here, which is again a group B game, can see the indoor levels are between 300 to 600 and the outdoor are between 100 to 200 lux, and obviously the outdoor level recommendations are mentioned only for a national level competition. We find the color temperature requirements are only up to about 2000 K, and the uniformity indices, as one can see, are going as high as 0.5 to 0.5, 0.7 for U1, U2 in case of an international level game in most of these games. Going further, we go to the group C game. As I said, group A is a slow game, group B is faster, and group C is really fast. We have here cricket, which is divided from the requirement of the illumination levels into two areas, that is the infield, where the main zone, outfield the exterior. and we find the level requirements are really high, going from 750 to 1500 for the infield and 500 to 1000 lux for the outfield. And you can also see that the uniformity indices are higher, going up to 0.7, 0.8 for the infield and 0.5, 0.6 for the outfield. The color rendering, color temperature more or less remaining at the same level. We may observe as we go along that these color rendering and color temperature requirements become more stringent for the media requirement, not as much for the normal lighting. Next, we have here the data for football. Once again, considering both indoor and outdoor, as can be seen, indoor is varying from 300 to 800 lux, and obviously this is a group B game, unlike cricket, which was a group C, which is a faster game with a smaller object size, whereas the object size in case of football is bigger. And one could clearly see the outdoor illumination level requirements are lower compared to the indoor level, and the color rendering and color temperature for the source requirements remain optimally around 65 and 4000 K. The really fast game we do find is the table tennis, high speed game. But one may say the levels appear to be low, but remember the area required to be illuminated is smaller, and as one may have observed, the mounting height is also much lower in this case for table tennis, and therefore these levels appear to be adequate between 300 to 600 lux. Now, the tennis, which is again categorized as indoor tennis and outdoor tennis, one could see the levels mentioned in this table. One finds that the levels for indoor tennis vary from 500 to 1000 lux. It's a group B game. Outdoor is varying from 250 to 750, and more or less around 0.4 to 0.6 uniformity indices appear to be all right. And most of these we have seen as per the recommendations. A RA of 65 and color temperature of 4000 appears to be adequate. As already mentioned, in all these tables, T was referring to training, amateur or professional requirement. R for general recreation. As already said, CA corresponds to national competition, amateur competition, and CP is national or international competition without media requirements. And the lux levels which have been mentioned, we have been talking about say 100 lux, 300 lux, 700 lux, 1500 lux. All these was the average minimum horizontal illuminance. Illuminance uniformity U1 as defined as E minimum by E maximum. Illuminance uniformity index U2 as the E minimum by E average. RA, of course, color rendering index. TK is the correlated color temperature, and the grouping was there as per CIE. A, B, C. A corresponding to slow speed games, B moderate, and C corresponding to very fast games. Now, from the point of view of using, these are average minimum levels indicated. So, in designing, one takes initial levels which are 1.5 times that of those indicated minimum levels. So, we have already seen that CIE grouping denotes speed of action in descending order A, B, C. One may observe small ball size and high speed of movement are grouped under category C. Now, this table here talks about the recommendations for media. What one could see is this is for a national coverage. From the point of view of media coverage, we have three categories. One, the national coverage, the other, international coverage, then the upcoming high definition television coverage. You can see this is categorized in terms of the grouping of the games A, B, C. The maximum shooting distance has been taken as the one of the criteria, with illuminance levels in lux for the main camera and secondary camera. As can be seen, the three distances chosen are 25 meters, 75 meters, 150 meters. For the group A, we find the lux levels for the main camera vary from 500 to 1000, whereas for the secondary camera they vary from 500 to 700. That is, the main camera lux level requirements are much higher. When you move on from group A to group B, these levels have increased further from 500, 700, 1000 to 500, 1000 and 1400. The three distances that are being considered are 25 meters, 75 meters and 150 meters. As can be seen, the color rendering is uniformly around 65 with 4000 as the color correlated temperature. Coming to the category C, group C, with shooting distances maintained between 25 meters and 75 meters, the recommended levels are 1000 and 1400. So, as the speed of the game goes higher, the required levels are higher, as it's been the earlier case. This table in fact shows the second important index that is necessary from the point of view of sport lighting, that is the uniformity index. This is giving the uniformity indices U1, U2. What was U1? U1 was the minimum illuminance to the maximum illuminance, whereas U2 was minimum to the average. So, for different distances of camera for different categories of the games seen, as you can see for group A, vertically U1 is minimum recommended is around 0.4, which becomes 0.5 when you move on to 150 meter camera distance, which again in the U2 varies from 0.5 to 0.6. As the speed of the game increases, we find this goes on to 0.6, 0.7. If you take the horizontal indices, they vary from 0.3 to 0.4 for group A, which become 0.4 to 0.6. So, the previous table had given us the recommended levels for the uniformity indices in the vertical plane. This table has given us uniformity indices in the horizontal table. So, we have been looking at the illuminance requirements from the point of view of a national TV coverage. We have seen and observe, we have talked about the uniformity indices in the vertical plane, but we have not mentioned the levels, because recall that if horizontal illuminance levels are taken care, vertical illuminance levels automatically get taken care. The table here talks about the requirements for TV coverage on an international level. As you can see, levels are much higher because the color it becomes more important to get better quality pictures, and therefore one could see that you have higher lux levels. This lists for group A and group B for differing camera distances. The horizontal illuminance levels specified average illuminance, minimum average illuminance levels for both main camera and secondary camera. So far, what do we find? We find the color rendering index RA and color temperature are adequate around 65 and 4000. This shows for group C, as has been in the previous instance. This is going higher and higher as the speed of the game increases. This is the uniformity indices, which are somewhat similar to what we found in case of a national thing. Obviously, uniformity indices do not change so much, but the levels of illuminance required levels are increasing. So, you have for group A going from 0.4 to 0.5 for U1 and 0.5 to 0.6 for U2, and for group C going up to 0.7 for U1 and 0.8 for U2. There similarly one finds the uniformity indices in the horizontal plane, which are similar to what we saw in the case of a national TV. So, what do we have? We have the three categories of games depending on the speed as per the CIE recommendations: A, B, C, and each of these having for three different camera distances. Now, coming to the upcoming high definition television requirements, we find the lux levels are really high. There is not only increase in the lux levels, but there is stringent requirement on the color rendering, which is now expected to be around 90 with a color correlated temperature of around 5500. Observe, even for group A games, the requirement of the lux has gone up from a minimum of 1000 for 25 meter shooting distance to 2000 for 150 meter shooting distance, which becomes higher up to 2500 for group B, and even for a secondary camera, which is around 1750, which is much higher than what it was in case of a national or international TV coverage, even for group C games here. So, the lux levels required go higher up to about 2500 lux, and the color rendering goes to 90 at 5500 degree color correlated temperature. The uniformity indices are shown in this table. Obviously, uniformity indices really do not change much, whether it is national or international TV or high definition television. As you can see, it similarly for group A, it varies from 0.5 to 0.6 for U1 and 0.6 to 0.7 for U2, and group C remains at 0.7 and 0.8 for U1 and U2. This is in the vertical plane. Similar, however, observe the uniformity indices in the horizontal plane have changed from what it was in case of a national TV and international TV coverage, where it used to be around 0.3, 0.4 for U1 and 0.4, 0.5 for U2. It has increased to 0.6, 0.7 for even group A games, and it remains at 0.7, 0.8 for group C games. So, we find that from the requirements of the HDTV, we have higher color temperature requirement and higher color rendering requirement. The one important issue that needs to be stressed is the horizontal illuminance values which are recommended or average values which need to be kept throughout the operation and installation, and therefore it's always suggested that at least 1.25 times these values are chosen initially. The vertical illuminance, if kept properly, enables the media operators to have their proper free choice of the camera angle. They can locate the camera appropriately. Now, the levels specified are at 1.5 meters above the play arena. The illuminance uniformity we have seen has varied from 0.3 to 0.6. We saw it was higher for high definition television or HD TV requirement than normal sport requirement or even national international TV coverage. So, it is stringent for TV or media. The human eye does not really bother so much. Uniformity levels are higher for TV. Now, as already mentioned, most of these lighting installations employ the metal halide lamps. The most sports installations employ metal halide lamps. What do they work on? They are in fact nothing but high pressure mercury lamps. We have said high pressure mercury lamps radiate, give rise to the radiation as a band radiation, and therefore color rendering is poor. The number of metal halides are added in addition to the mercury vapor to improve the color rendering. Then what happens? By addition of these halides are partly vaporized, and because of which they dissociate into halogen and metal in the central region where it is core, which is hot, and therefore the radiation attains the color pertaining to the metal. So, the groups of halides that are included, they are categorized as 3-band color radiators, which could correspond to 3 primary colors, multi-line radiators or molecular radiators. The 3-band radiators normally employed are indium, titanium and sodium based halides. Multi-line radiators are deuterium, hafnium, thorium, titanium, sodium, etc. The molecular radiators come under the category of stannic chloride and stannic iodide, SnI2. These are the things, and the main use of these halides is in improving the color rendering ability of mercury vapor radiation. In total, the lecture summary could be: the sports lighting addresses 4 user groups in its mind. They are players, officials, spectators and the media. Category of sport is made, category or grouping of the sport is made as A, B or C according to CIE, depending on the object or the ball that is being used for the game and place of the game. Here C corresponding to the fast paced game with small sized object, and A corresponding to a large sized object with slow pace. That is, athletics have been grouped under group A, whereas tennis was grouped under C and badminton was grouped under B. Horizontal illuminance, vertical illuminance and the illuminance uniformity are important for this kind of a lighting, and in fact we have had a look at various recommended levels according to CIE for the sports lighting. For from all these angles. The first set of tables were corresponding to the players and spectators along with officials. Players, they need to play and they need to observe the game. Spectators enjoy and the officials have to assess the game. Then we had requirements from the media categorized from 3 different angles: national, international TV coverage and high definition television coverage. Color appearance is important for media coverage. From all user groups, we find a CRA of 65 and color temperature of 4000 K is recommended. However, a caution is to be added here that for the high definition television requirement, these 2 values have recommended are much higher. CRI becomes 90 and color temperature of 5500 is recommended for high definition television. For most other things, it is okay. The questions that may be taken up from this topic are: where do we use narrow beam floodlights? Where do we use wide beam floodlights? Why are lamps used for spot lighting operated at higher voltage than rated voltage? Now, we can take up some of the answers to questions of the previous lecture. What are the factors which need to be considered while designing interior lighting? The factors that need to be considered while designing interior lighting are: purpose of lighting or intention or the service for which the lighting is providing, the class of interiors, the luminaires suited and the effect of the color. Obviously, reflection from ceilings, walls and floor needs to be taken into account. Why are shadows important while designing interior? Not only in interior lighting, shadows are important, in fact, for actuating depth of object to be perceived. In fact, even in today's lecture, we said one of the crucial factors in spot lighting is modeling and shadows, and depending on the nature of the light, one may have hard shadows or fast faint shadows. We said we need not have extremes, we should have something in between, and they are necessary for the observers to be able to perceive the depth of the object. What are the defects in interior lighting considering from brightness point? Major defects in lighting systems arise due to too bright luminaire, too dark floor and interiors. So, in fact, we did mention in the lecture that there is a certain ratio which needs to be maintained between the darkest object to the brightest object in a room, between 1:3:10, in order to avoid such. So, we have light color interiors with large sources of low brightness. This takes care of such defects. What is the criteria for deciding the height of a window? Now, windows are necessary to enable the natural light to be percolate, and that is how we are able to decide whether to have artificial lighting. So, windows, if they are located on only one wall, the height to the top of the window should be greater than half the width of the room. On the other hand, if they are located on both the walls, then the height to the top should not be less than 1/6 of the distance between the walls. The idea is that average illuminance level to the interior depth of the room is maintained. Why is periodic check of interior lamps required? Periodic check is required because the lamps need to be replaced when they reach their when their life reduces, and So, whenever the life reduces by about 75% or illumination level falls below standard level, it becomes necessary. So, and this can be taken care through regular maintenance by cleaning the dust, grease or moisture that is accumulated, and often it is advised to uh, uh, replace in groups rather than in uh, terms of individual lamps. Large group replacement is advisable.